Hey everybody, we're gonna get started. If you want to start finding a place to sit. Can you still hear me? How is that? Perfect. Thank you, James. Thanks everybody. I think we're mostly out of seats, but there's some spots around the edges if you want to find a spot to be comfortable. All right, and the live stream is happening right now. It's all coming together. So good to see you all. My name is Laura Henriksen. I'm the program director here at the Poetry Project, and I'm so happy. And I'm so thrilled and grateful and excited to be with you all for the first event of our spring 2023 season, and how incredibly fortunate that we have with us tonight Lucy Ives and Stacy Szymaszek. Before we get started with tonight's program, I just have a few updates and reminders about the space. So first off, there are 2 all-gender restrooms located upstairs, and then 2 more here on the first floor. If you need access to those first floor bathrooms, just find me or anyone on staff, and we'll be happy to get that door open for you. I also ask you to please keep your masks on for the duration of the time that we're inside, now that we've moved to the reading portion of the program. If you don't have a mask, we have plenty available at the desk. I'd be happy to bring one for you. I also wanted to note, marvelously, that the newest issue of the newsletter is out, and I believe we still have some copies at the front desk, so absolutely be sure to get one if you don't have one already. Would you come say a few words about it, Kay? Please. I would love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay.
Thank you.
Spontaneously, yes. Hi, we got copies last Wednesday, so exciting. It's the winter issue. It has remembrances for Bernadette Mayer and this incredible collage that KB Jones did based on the photo from memory. It has interviews with Rachel James and Crystal Langell and Joss Barton and Casey Plett. It has Brontez Purnell's maybe first ever published poem after he read here and was like, oh, poetry is easy. So please, we have hundreds of copies. Get yourself a copy. Get your friend a copy.
Thank you, Kay.
Here.
Putting Kay on the spot a little bit, but it really is just such an astonishing new issue, so do be sure to get a copy. And then also I wanted to share with you, now that we're back for the season, we have a lot of really, really wonderful things coming up. So this Friday, we have a virtual event, which is the celebration of our fall 2022 workshops, which were facilitated by Ty Freedom Ford, Vicky Now, and Jared Stanley. So those are always some of my very favorite workshops, or my favorite readings, so I hope that you will join us for that. And then next Wednesday, we'll be back with a celebration with Belladonna, with Kimberly Alidio, Simone Kearney, Kate O'Kane, so another unmissable event. A lot of really fun things happening here this spring. And I think that's all of the announcements and reminders from me. So I'm now really honored and delighted to turn it over to Mónica de la Torre to introduce Lucy Ives.
Hi, everybody. It's amazing to be here. I'm absolutely honored to be introducing Lucy Ives. Happy Ash Wednesday, by the way. I almost stopped to get my little cross around the corner, but I didn't. Okay. If this were a mythical tale and not the introduction to a poetry reading, I'd be telling you the story of a supernaturally focused, many-headed being who had authored a prodigiously varied output, managing simultaneously to fall within and push the boundaries of each of the forms it was written in. I'm afraid this tale will have to wait for another occasion, but not my sharing my marvel at the versatility of Lucy Ives's adventurous writing. Just reading her art criticism in publications such as Art in America, Art Forum, and Frieze could keep you occupied for a few days. Lucid essays on Meret Oppenheim and Etel Adnan's Leporellos, just to mention a couple, prove that her vigorous critical output achieves the integrity of the art historians while avoiding the genre's trappings. For one, tedious sentences riddled with deadening academic jargon. When Ives does engage such language, however, she does so satirically and with perfect pitch, as she does, for instance, in her most recent novel, Life is Everywhere, published by Grey Wolf in the fall of 2022. Among other recent books are the short story collection Cosmogony, the novel Loudermilk, or The Real Poet, or The Origin of the World, and the novella 90s. She is also the author of the poetry books Orange Roses and The Hermit, of which I once wrote, and I quote myself, "Stray thoughts are the protagonists of The Hermit. They might be the after effects of intense focus, yet come across as decidedly eccentric in their resistance to systems that might dull their prismatic luminescence. Here they deliver proof of Parataxis's poiesis. Ives' exquisite take on ellipsis as realism is a dream as both vision and something that fully satisfies a wish." I allow myself to quote this blurb here, partially in a nod to Lucy's palimpsestic writing, materially manifesting time's passage and the evolution of a particular character's writing, but also because poiesis and the plenitude of non-instrumentalized thought are at the heart of a question that the range of her writing might prompt you to ask. Are her novels poets' novels, or are her poems novelist poems? This is a worthwhile question not because it might lead to an answer, which would be boring, but rather as an excuse to tease out its implications. If Roberto Bolaño's novels teeming with poets and scholars consumed by the wildest of pursuits come to mind, so does Jack Spicer's claim in After Lorca that prose invents and poetry discloses. I think, too, of Gertrude Stein's line of reasoning in Poetry and Grammar that everything has a lot to do with poetry. Everything has a lot to do with prose. And has prose anything to do with poetry? And has poetry anything to do with prose? Stein posits the following difference. Prose is the balance, the emotional balance that makes the reality of paragraphs and the unemotional balance that makes the reality of sentences. And having completely realized that sentences are not emotional while paragraphs are, prose can be the essential balance that is made inside something that combines the sentence and the paragraph. You can see that prose, really great writers, really great written prose is bound to be made up of more verbs, adverbs, prepositions, prepositional clauses, and conjunctions than nouns. The vocabulary in prose, of course, is important. If you like, vocabulary is always important. Anybody can know that by thinking of words. But what is poetry? Poetry has to do with vocabulary just as prose has not. Poetry is, I say, essentially a vocabulary just as prose is essentially not. And what is the vocabulary of which poetry absolutely is? It is a vocabulary entirely based on the noun, as prose is essentially and determinately and vigorously not based on the noun. So that was all Gertrude Stein, as you could probably tell. Regardless of the parts of speech it favors, Lucy's writing is characterized by a voracious lexical appetite, producing a uniquely textured vocabulary, riffing on Virginia Woolf's take on botulism, for instance, or one in which an adjective like uxorious, and I feel like I'm mispronouncing it, is not out of place in the gossipy yet philosophical dialogue between the unnamed protagonists of the story Scary Sights that appears in Cosmogony, which, in addition to discussing social media's characteristic candor and duplicity, succinctly presents and embodies a theory of literature as a place where information is leaked. Does anybody know what uxorious means, by the way? You get brownie points. Here's the definition: having or showing an excessive or submissive fondness for one's wife. Food for thought. But back to the question of genre. The speaker of one of the fragments in The Hermit provides a perfectly satisfying, if unassuming, answer. I quote, "I can't describe myself as a poet. I'm the author of some kind of thinking about writing. Some kind of thinking about writing it is, as you're about to witness. Please help me in welcoming the ever-inspiring, deliriously surprising, and generously astute Lucy Ives to the Poetry Project tonight."
Wow, what an honor. Thank you for that amazing introduction, and I'm so excited to be here tonight and reading with Stacy. This is it's such a pleasure, and so nice to see all of you. I'm going to read to you from the beginning of this novel, Life is Everywhere, the title of the first section of the novel is Paralysis. And you will find out why it's called that. The Byzantine Emperor Leo VI, born 866, died 912, was known as the Wise, Leon ha Sophos, for his love of books. He was only moderately successful as a military campaigner and married 4 times, an activity condemned by the church and therefore requiring complex administrative maneuvering. Leo is remembered to history for his intricate, prolific, and no doubt tedious sermons, and more gloriously for the codification of all existing Byzantine law into a 6-volume, 60-book corpus called the Basilica, or Royal Laws. During the latter half of his reign, he issued an edict banning the production of blood sausage. This edict is thought to be the earliest written evidence of an outbreak of botulism. They did not reveal themselves to human science until some 900 years later. The tube-shaped bacterium Clostridium botulinum, with its proteinaceous emanation, botulinum toxin, a substance produced when the bacteria grow in the air-free conditions they require for flourishing, among which brine baths, salt packing, tin cans. The toxin is among the most potent natural poisons on the planet, a microgram being lethal to humans when inhaled. It is, in a molecular sense, infernally clever, working upon nerve synapses to prevent the broadcast of stimuli by impeding release of the compound acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter. The biochemical radio silence caused by botulinum toxin is what we call paralysis. Early symptoms include blurred vision, mild loss of facial muscle control, including ptosis or drooping eyelids, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, cramps, and difficulty breathing. In more extreme poisonings, death occurs within 48 hours from respiratory failure. During the sufferer's decline, the brain remains functional. Consciousness continues unabated. Scroll back a tiny bit. At the end of the 18th century, the southern German countryside, reeling from various military incursions, was impoverished and health standards allegedly sehr lax. In 1793, at the village of Wildbad in Württemberg, 13 people became ill and 6 died from consumption of a local delicacy, Saumagen, cooked pig's stomach filled with blood sausage. Yum. Such incidents must have continued, for in 1802, the royal government in Stuttgart issued a public warning about blood sausage, that archaic culprit. In 1811, the medical section of the Department of Internal Affairs of the Kingdom of Württemberg once again warned against sausage poisoning, as the ailment was termed. Medical professors weighed in. One Herr Dr. Johann Heinrich Ferdinand von Autenrieth studied symptoms and concluded housewives were to blame, in that they, disliking messy burst casings, refused to boil their sausages thoroughly. Clarity came in the form of an unlikely figure, Justinus Andreas Christian Kerner, born 1786, died 1862, a medical man, and as a medical man might be in those days, visionary poet. In 1811, Kerner published a strange travelogue, Die Reiseschatten, Travel Shadows, recording the wanderings of one Lux, an imagined itinerant showman who specializes in shadow puppetry. The book was a fictionalized version of Körner's own journeys through Germany and Austria following his graduation from the University of Tübingen, where he had trained to become a physician and studied with Autenried, enemy to housewives and undercooked Wurst. Körner's later life as an artist included membership in the coterie of romantic poets of Schwabia, as well as investigation of paranormal phenomena. During the 1820s, Körner came under the influence of Franz Mesmer's doctrine of animal magnetism. Körner's most famous publication was a long Mesmer-influenced case study of 1829, Die Seherin von Prevorst, the seeress of Prevorst, in which Körner documented his treatment of the wife of a local merchant, Frau Friederike Haufe, who was given to communion with the invisible spirits of the dead, as well as privy to the pursuits of aliens living on the left and right sides of the moon. Far from curing Frau Haufe, Körner became convinced that she was a true psychic, a creature with one foot in the realm beyond, and, as if in confirmation of his diagnosis, she wasted away and died after discontinuing treatment with him. Körner also liked to make drawings of fanciful insect-like beings from random ink blots. He then used his semi-automatic illustrations as inspiration for poems. He termed his work Klexographien, or blot drawing. It was almost certainly known to Rorschach. In the 1810s, Körner, a young man, was still intimately involved with the academic medical establishment as well as empiricism, a tool that he was using to secure his career and that he never entirely abandoned, even in his studies of the uncanny. In 1815, he sent a detailed report regarding rural sausage poisonings to his former professor, Autenried, who obliged Körner 2 years later by publishing it in the Tübinger Blätter für Naturwissenschaften and Erzheilkunde, a professional journal on the natural sciences and pharmacology. Körner continued to collect food poisoning cases and in 1820 brought forth a monograph, Neue Beobachtungen über die in Württemberg so häufig vorfallenden tödlichen Vergiftungen durch den Genuss geräucherter Würste, New observations on the deadly poisonings occurring so often in Württemberg on account of consumption of smoked sausages, whose title seems to indicate a raging epidemic. Körner describes the symptoms of sickened individuals. The tear fluid disappears. The gullet becomes a dead and motionless tube. In all mucus cavities of the human machine, the secretion of the normal mucus stands still from the biggest, the stomach, toward the tear canal and the excretory ducts of the lingual glands. No saliva is secreted. No drop of wetness is felt in the mouth. No tear is secreted anymore. No earwax appears in the auditory canal. Also, signs of drying out of the eustachian tube become apparent. No mucus is secreted in the nose. No more sperma is secreted. The testicles decrease. Urination can only be performed by standing and with difficulty. Extreme drying out of the palms, the soles, and the eyelids occurs. Paralysis attacks flow. Sources retreat. All channels are desolate and arid. Fascinated, Körner attempted to isolate the mysterious toxin. He investigated and manipulated the fatty parts of affected meats, administering what he termed a fat poison or fatty acid to a menagerie of non-human subjects, birds, cats, rabbits, frogs, flies, locusts, snails, as well as experimenting on himself with non-lethal doses, which he noted had a sour taste. Autenried, to his credit, was alarmed by his students' use of his own body as a testing ground for his theory of das Fettgift, and requested that Körner desist. Whether Kerner did eventually stop selectively paralyzing himself or not, in a monograph that followed in 1828, he made a breakthrough, concluding that the nerve conduction is brought by the toxin into a condition in which its influence on the chemical process of life is interrupted. The capacity of nerve conduction is interrupted by the toxin in the same way as in an electrical conductor by rust. He also suggested, perhaps inspired by his own experience of the poison's activities, one wonders what he felt, that it might be used for therapeutic purposes. He went on to receive the not entirely flattering nickname of Wurstkörner, and the better-known poet Heinrich Heine famously mocked Kerner as the poet, quote, who sees ghosts and toxic blood sausages. So much for Kerner and us Gift, even if he was mostly correct. He did not quite perceive his fugitive and extremely small object. Meanwhile, the Europeans kept at their semi-raw meats for the rest of the century. And in 1895, a group of musicians dining on a pickled ham in the Belgian village of Elzel began to experience visual disturbances and muscle paralysis, among other miseries. Fanfare les amis réunis, brass band of the reunited friends, had gathered for the burial of a local man who had lived a long life. Following the funeral repast, 3 members of the band died, and 10 more very nearly died. A microbiologist, Émile Pierre-Marie van Ermingen of the University of Ghent, was called in. Van Ermingen had studied internationally at various laboratories, including that of Robert Koch, founder of modern bacteriology in Berlin, and was able to successfully identify an anaerobic microorganism he called Bacillus botulinus, later Clostridium botulinum. In other words, in the spleen of one of the deceased musicians and in the murderous ham, van Ermingen discovered numerous traces of microorganisms that thrived in the absence of air. He published his observations in 1897. Botulus is the Latin word for sausage. Thus was botulism born, although, as we know from the Edict of Leo the Wise, it had been a human problem for at least a millennium. In 1904, a batch of canned white beans became home to productive Clostridium botulinum in Germany. In 1906, there was an outbreak of botulism in the United States, also due to the toxin occurring in canned foods. In 1918, there was an influenza pandemic, which is mostly unrelated, except that it made manifest the genocidal effects of very small biological entities, with the H1N1 influenza virus causing the deaths of some 50 to 100 million people, roughly 3 to 5% of the world's population, in 2 years. This pandemic happened, of course, to coincide with the end of the First World War, a conflict that saw German development of anthrax and glanders, both bacterial infections associated with domesticated herbivores, cattle, horses, but that may also affect humans. Before this time, smallpox had been Western warcraft's most effective agent. A ban on biological weapons was forthcoming in the form of the Geneva Protocol of 1925, and in the United States, relevant worthies seemed to feel that the use of bacteria, viruses, etc. was too unpredictable to be a reliable killing method. Yet, during the Second World War, matters changed. In 1941, a U.S. military attaché in Switzerland reported that German and French collaborators at the Koch Foundation laboratories near Paris were in the midst of producing botulinum toxin, abbreviated BOTX, for dissemination by airburst bombs. This, along with a lecture by a Japanese doctor, Hojo Enryo, on bacteriological warfare, delivered at the Berlin Military Academy of Medicine, spurred American efforts. In 1942, the War Research Service, directed by George W. Merck, corporate pharmacologist, began its explorations, and in Maryland at Camp and later Fort Detrick from 1943 all the way to 69, year of the American moonwalk, researchers toiled to isolate, purify, and crystallize BOTX type A, an endeavor in which they were successful, in part as they believed, beginning in 1943, that the planned D-Day invasion might involve a biological component, with German V-1 rockets armed with BOTX. After the war, and after the non-use of biological weapons and use instead of atomic ones, the BOTX consolidated at Fort Detrick was shared in a controlled way. At Johns Hopkins, one Dr. Daniel Drachman began injecting highly diluted quantities of the toxin into animals, showing that the resulting muscle atrophy did not lead to botulism. This outcome was taken up by a San Francisco-based ophthalmologist, Dr. Alan Scott, who is interested in correcting squints and ocular twitches without surgery. Scott began treating the extraocular muscles of non-human primates with the agent and found it was an effective cure, if one that needed to be repeated, as the localized paralysis tended to wear off in a few months. It was now the 1970s. In 1978, Scott attempted a trial with humans. An ophthalmologist in Amsterdam, Dr. P.V.T.M. de Jong, was working with the experimental treatment too. In December of 1989, the American Food and Drug Administration licensed BOTX as an orphan drug called oculinum for the management of chronic facial spasms. In 1990, the FDA published a list of guidelines for the use of botulin, and the next year, Scott sold a patent for oculinum to the then Canadian pharmaceutical company Allergan for $9 million. Oculinum's revenue in 1991, year of the fall of the Soviet Union, was $13 million. For the next decade, Allergan researched additional applications for its neuroparalytic poison. A 1992 study found that cosmetic injection of Clostridium botulinum A exotoxin into globular frown lines was more effective than the use of collagen, to which some people are allergic and which can cause blindness. The study observed that treatment of this particular type of frown line, or wrinkle that occurs between the eyes, may be disproportionately significant and even necessary, since it can indicate socially ambiguous emotions, such as terror, grief, and rage. Some people, for example, suffering from particularly deep frown lines are assumed to be displeased or angry all the time, even when they are not. The toxin works to inhibit calcium metabolism in the presynaptic neuron at the cholinergic neuromuscular junction, and therefore prevents neuromuscular transmission, resulting in reversible paralysis. In other words, a person's face can't move. This treatment differs from collagen injection in that it acts on the underlying muscular cause rather than cutaneous effect. You will need to keep the toxin freeze-dried until you are ready to use it. Before you inject it into a patient, ask her to frown. Make the injection into the corrugator muscle. You will learn that many treated patients say they like not being able to frown. You may find that this incapacity produces a positive self-image. Today, Botox, as oculinum was named for off-label use, supplies an annual revenue estimated at more than $2.5 billion. Additional studies investigating the so-called facial feedback hypothesis have shown that Botox can also be effective in treating depression. Because humans are imitative animals and because afferent feedback from muscles and skin may influence emotions, a woman whose face can no longer arrange itself into a frown is not subject to increasingly intense waves of self-stimuli. She cannot further sadden herself by manifesting sadness. Therefore, much as for the sufferer of botulism, the working of the toxin is first manifest in the face, so too, for the Botox patient, relief from symptoms associated with depression is manifest on the countenance in more ways than one. Further study of the bacterium in its natural environment soil, silt, lakes, coastal waters, oceans, intestinal tracts of mammals, their excreta, has shown that there is in fact a virus, or phage, that infects the bacterium, enabling production of the toxin by affecting the bacterium's DNA, even as the toxin is only produced when the bacterium is under stress and therefore releasing spores. Very little is known about the phage. Meanwhile, the beings on Earth most affected by botulism are not humans, but rather waterfowl, which die at a rate of some 10 to 100,000 per year. Special conditions are needed for the bacteria to produce spores and thus the toxin: warmth, protein, an anaerobic environment, wetness. Plant matter and invertebrate animals decomposing along the surface of a lake in sun meet these criteria. They are feasted upon by ignorant bird life. I'm going to take a picture of you guys.
Lucy, that was so marvelous. It was virtuosic. Thank you so much. If you haven't already read the book, we have some copies for sale, and I just think you really have to get it. I read it in like 2 breathless days. I'm totally transported by it. We'll do a quick 5-minute break, so it's like 9:05. We'll be back for real to hear from Stacy Szymaszek. So see you in 5 minutes. All right, let's start regathering ourselves for the second half of this reading. If you want to find a seat. All right, let's get settled in. Okay. All right. It's my deepest honor now to get to introduce, Stacy Szymaszek. That the word experience has its roots in to suffer is something I learned from Stacy Szymaszek's newest collection of poems, Famous Hermits. This is a fascinating lesson from a poet who has for years offered impactful and surprising visions of her days through her project as a record keeper, a critical witness and interpreter, chronicling in her poems the world as she finds it, as it strikes her, as she moves through it and moves it. They go on, quote, "My primary concern is not for you to relate to me, but to honor me as a true other who is nonetheless a real person, a real poetry," unquote. In documenting the passage of time at the particular position from which she experiences it, Szymaszek avoids creating some false universal, avoids eliding difference for the sake of an imagined coherence, and instead offers us the opportunity to join them as witnesses in regarding the heavy intricacy of the vast social, historical, and political web that constitutes a person in their room, writing, or standing barefoot outside, or moving from one place to another. She approaches this project of complex recognition in what might be the only way one really could, through unwavering attention to the body, which is also, of course, unwavering attention to the lived realities of capitalism as they are unevenly distributed across different experiences and positions. This activation of a somatic criticality is fundamental to all of Szymaszek's work. One reason I love their poetry so much is that they are never passive in their witnessing. These are very pissed off poems. Szymaszek is righteous in their critique of power and its myriad terrors, as well as the many people and forces upholding power's horrors when it serves them to do so. Through her attention to embodiment, she is demanding another world, a world of rich and rank eroticism, a world of poetic integrity, a world where neither poetry nor health are luxuries, where there is time to do more than work to survive. She writes, "This touch says, I am a human standing beside you, and in a lightning flash of recognition, there we are, standing side by side in another world Szymaszek wrote our way to." Let's all lift our desert hearts now to welcome Stacy Szymaszek.
Thank you so much, Laura. Lucy, that was wonderful. Thank you for reading with me. Thank you to the Poetry Project and all of the Poetry Project staff for making this event happen. I think the book might have sold out. Is it gone? It's gone. But here it is. I hope you check it out. It has this wonderful cover by artist KB Jones, published by Archway. Thank you very much to both Archway and KB. Of course, I'm going to read something new in progress, because I'm a poet at the Poetry Project. That's what we do here. So, it's a little drafty. It's very much in progress. I have 2 parts written. I kind of envision maybe 5. I feel like Laura's introduction was actually a good introduction for this new piece, too. It's about work and health and conditions, chronic conditions and aging, and what is health in a world that doesn't want you to be healthy. It's also kind of a menopause poem. Yeah, come on. Menopause. But also puberty, death, kind of like the big transformations that we go through, birth. Okay. So it's called Starving is the Energy. 1. Or I should say, starving is the energy, not the obstacle. MRI is Dread King. Don't open, but I did. Boing, boom, check, times 6. Black box voices from a crashing tube pointed downward. Head hutch made from the stuff of replacement limbs. Plan for future events, harmonize with the German nonsense. Lulled grip, the rubber call ball became at home between my palm and belly fat. Boing, boom, check, just 2 more. Organ magnet, chariot. The duo couldn't detect my feet, buried in boot, went all techno. Terror respatialized and switched on to full present, convivial mortal. Style is a necessity in getting on. Wrapped in fair isle knit, the stiff is my larynx. Voce bassa, testosterone oration. My dead can now ask, a formality, and get the full story. Elfin together, gathered round, wet lumber, crackled and burned. Last ditch, dignity grab. Hose head and a bite guard. I know it's serious. Open mouth wide to abort belching attack. The dullest documentary made sleep into the early orange cold glow. I begged ye stove ignite, and it did. Trading finicky streaks with a sanity shower. Couch surfer, ass on remote, a bone where God sat down on the poet in order to sack the indigestion of his lines. If you don't get the image, you don't know the bottom. Are amongst the have-not, needled your perineum. I always say that word, somebody help me. Perineum, thank you. You know that area. Needled your perineum for resurrection of the spirit. Yeah. I left at the stud farm. I decided to remember the moment, Monday, January, a marker for memory of a majestic body. Belting out communiques regarding her upset, I closed the bank, cash up the ass, nose blows, snot coins, frozen shoulder, green apple gut. I'm grateful and shut the hell up. The problem of job is starving is the energy, going forth by day, playing at a person entitled to health. Leg strength as predictor of longevity, language strength. Words springing through space made us equilibrists. Be not afraid, written in the Bible 365 times. I go before you, draping the fern over my head as I would a wig. I go before you, withheld from my vocation. Pay the plumber, rob Peter, pay Paul. Grim tour of the not very handyman Band-Aids. You see these stalactites? I see out the corner of my eye the shite pipe. The onus is on none other than, the service is, it's murky who is responsible. The test result faxed to the anal equivalent of an office. The woman on the phone is Stacy, and I am Stacy. Orpheus enters the afterlife, donning afterlife surgical gloves, doubling as a paper bag for hyperventilation, doubling as a pufferfish, blowy or toady. Moving but motionless as the habit of being your own worst enemy, the poet has this inflated toad full of afterlife air, a bubble to be placed in the vein, so state of the art, nostril breathing freedom in the spirit battle. Nights are quiet of my gagging, just the silent delivery of air and heat, sleeping the sleep of a beefy baby who withstood the brutal touch of adult inquisition, laughing so hard in my dream I can't speak. I am one of those actors that can't keep it together in a scene where the monster's costume is absurd and the actor playing the monster delivers an affect, delight in ruining a scene. Talk about a scene. The conditions of our mother's wombs months before we laid them wombs. Bothered hormonal status, epidural made her think we slid out like butter lambs. 40-year puberty romp, inhaling boiling valerian, over by decree. Participants in a refrain we strain to see what is under our noses as our wardrobes as the weather. We were mute in the beyond, in a long-suffering profile, my survival framed as banal and stoic, rehearsing survival as you survive, so you are ready for surviving. The harm of yore is so fucking chatty. ... Fucking fluent in Latin too. If you fight the age, it ages you, ... Can you believe that in this middledom too far from the pizzeria, I wept for pizza? Wiped up my last egg with Sicilian linen, called out for a woman who the last time I saw her said, "This is the last time," and waved her new purple Christmas panties to signal royal abdication of her chronic pain, a royal pain in the ass. A starving energy cut triangles of time within each pay period. Poet, poetry, nonprofit, My desire spelled out my obstacle on parchment and auto-combusted. Conformity sets the stage for ill treatment. I conformed and was made ill. My death came corseted and used agitprop, a dead giveaway. My response, of course, to be sucked in to a deadening, highly fashioned drama. She tormented me because she was tormented. My death is not tormented. It was not my death. 2. My priors, my poems, attempts of a court jester to ride a wild pig, tempting an omnivorous accident, a pact to eat each other's feet. Muddy trudge to the chickens where I sang Hungry Chicken, the 26th member of the chorus, a pact to eat each other's thighs. One cat emerged from the woodpile and said she loved me before throwing herself at the chicken fence, a pact to eat each other's eyes. Yonder bend to the loafing shed where a cow lowered her head and flicked her horns, a pact to eat each other's guts. Now successor, now sovereign, and free to call home my floating DNA from war-torn regions and wombs. Now death enters my room per hour, is incidental, secret of secrets, by God, through the old pipes, to conjugate in scummy familiarity. In the dream, I said, never before in all of my dreams, and there I was, having just purchased a house on this avenue with a Turkish runner up the staircase, which I ran to, jarred awake, mid-running. The house was near the church where I sloughed off some quiddity, spiraled blood into the toilet, mesmerized creation of faux breaks. Midriff so nipped then in an anabolic state. Millions of follicles now inside and upon the scalp, spiraling tumble bunnies. And I see phantom blood on single-ply tissue before a perfectly transparent gel is revealed. Numb thumb, dum-dum. Maybe it's just a numb thumb connected to a wrecked neck. Intermittent trouble in small confines eased with pleasure compresses, such as reading by a mimetic stove, a throb. We burned up hours together, unterrified by the menace of our future enjoyment, making educated guesses re Barbellion's trick, how not to boner kill yourself. Starving is the energy that brings me to this bounty, another workaround for now we know, goth doth extract day labor. Assume the position, supine, night yacht, crumbs of meat pie on my chest, caloric storage hereafter. A desk is no place for me. The rooms in this house morphed into other-world, pillowy shapes for form to function. Numb thumb's pocket heater, shrouded device, sleight of hand, donor-driven. Sorry it's so cold. Tenderly toward numb thumb, envisioned as my infant, you will always be my baby. Fake it till you make it, start with my thumb. And the move from usable to less usable, perhaps the more powerful thing to get in the way is my baby love. The physician turned from her laptop and pointed. God did not send his son to us so we could suffer. Every cell is being called to protect. We babies, as the work of babies is to live. The call was interrupted by the sound of an acetylene torch, the thrill of winter, equipment breakdown. The coldest day of the year, the new calf preferred to have his head scratched, brushed 5 of the herd, releasing fur and dried dung, the grande dame who tilts her ears back, and Nebula next to her who doesn't give a fuck. This touch says, I am the plummeting schema of a woman-adjacent being. This touch says, I am the light, burning sensation, and arthritis aglow, resting on your back. This touch says, I am a human standing beside you. Why fear something that's lawful by nature? There is no borrowed time. The archive reflected the quiet quitting of the era, the quitting of thousands of physicians. A portal lit up, a robot tried to help. You have the heart of an 82-year-old. Your true age is a 147-year-old cat. You have the heart of a 500-year-old clam. Your true age is half of an eon. You have the heart of a tree of digesting koalas. Your true age is a menopausal killer whale. Ceasing to make energy, death will come, having found my dead dog's leash in a closet, a dandy and an ascot who tests my knowledge of commands. Stay, stay, shake, shake, come on. Could I be as I have been and never can be no more? And make solid all I dream, never not more happy than now? For this music is golden milk, releasing us from fixity. The baby is released from their attachment style. The puberty of the preteen releases a ship's manifest of their progenitors. The teen redoes prom with the freedom of the baby and still eats their corsage. The young adult lays in the green shag, listening to distant engines, prognosticating more bodily sight, safe from all fiends of hell and enemies of their soul. For this reason, the pain line is long. The longer thumb numb, the worse pins and needles, and the longer, the lower the success. The more burning thigh and nervy face joining the eye twitch, the lower the chance of affording feelings return. The more I accrue personal time, the quicker it calcifies into waiting room. For this reason, we send messages using a portal in the pitch hours of morning. The registers of hearing about the broken horn and seeing the broken horn, having been eye level to the vulvas and fundaments of the herd, curry combing dung, I looked into the horn hole, a living dribble and ooze, into a cavern beneath the cute tuft of curly hair. And my own orifices blew open in empathetic signaling. My blood elder met this condition with anger and banished the living for the living word of God, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and of marrow. And that's how much I got on that one. You guys are fun. Okay, so I'm going to read a poem from Famous Hermits, and there's poems in Famous Hermits, and there's the poem Famous Hermits. So I'm going to read one poem, and then read from the poem Famous Hermits. This is called What I Attach to Are Her Decimals. And there's a Bernadette Mayer famous line in here, so I'm reading it for her tonight. Coffee aroma fueled insomniac dreams, all ambition to vacate the premise in 7 days in one piece. Tucson calling, it's all very old-fashioned, both Western and medieval. I am skirting the robes, though cannot evade what my idolatry beckons, so I roster a chair, my weight made kindling, a goblet that crashed off the sill as I air it out, perhaps made in art, and blood on the microfiber. Watched 2 documentaries on Kevin Aucoin and cried too much, sounding some doomy pop theory about the cups of queers raised in the 80s never having a bottom. False bottoms? Pour anything into us. Do we only become more self-contained? Also, Aucoin, give us back our eyebrows. I am I because my eyebrows are knowing wolves, slabs of knowing, you jerk. I am a beautiful butch with high cheekbones, I was born to be good at knowing what I hate, ergo capitalism. As if dividing my things into further storage units can obscure my consumer history. Books and beds and bikes. My body takes me on a ride by FLRS, maintaining some cardinal grip on concepts of why funders fund numbers 1 through 3. Boil source into ethos, 6 figures your salvation. No, the toilet you went down to find it overflows. There are many who make their descent palatable, and they will keep bearing children. White-tail specks on the mountain, red-tail speck in the sky. From a tub I won't see the likes of again, my Soto Programa of laxity. Led us to our royalties. My home on the edge of another campus, where my love notes passers-by, taking pictures of the purple cactus, and reports that a larger Bialetti makes her wonder if she has shrunk. What I attach to are her decimals, the infinity of ways to kiss any inch of her, and knowing any inch of me is noble to her. Okay. These are sections from Famous Hermits. We tell ourselves stories to darken our moods before they do. Delving into historical imagination, we turn up a deficit in the language of men. Young ones can and do kill for him, infiltrating mock empathy, deploying words such as terrible while rubbing his hands together, an occultist running a country. Perhaps we need to permit ourselves propaganda, to use sound, arch, sly, oft ugly, and check records for those who fought fire with poetry. Sometimes the prophecy is simply everyone admitting everything we know at the same time, ergo truth. The privilege of knowing your craft is, it is yours to abandon. The low spirit arrives, we call ourselves the same word, but are animated by different concerns, creating another they. I'm not generating a personality in a non-industrialized city, setting inquisitive energy free. Why haven't I heard the doves this August? How childlike both my attachment and outrage that they are avidly hunted. Who would fucking kill a dove? Duh, who wouldn't? This morning I watched the agent walk a repairman around the house, remembered when my mother was an agent and I drew a mustache on her portrait. When it rains, the room where I write poems leaks from 2 different microcracks. Why I think this is vital information has to do with unburying oneself from a heap of devices, a literary system I can't live in. Eremita is the Latinization of the Greek eremites, of the desert, which comes from eremos, signifying desert, uninhabited, hence desert dweller. In the 13th century, the church's pressure to regularize hermits forced many, women especially, to join established orders. One should never live without accusers to fear. Alone in cemeteries, at city gates, on or under bridges, roadsides, mountains, forests, river, islands, and the desert, where it was prudent for lone women to dress in male attire, to not be mistaken for a demon and thrashed. I know I'm still unwell because my mind mistakes the shine of a book for my phone detonating with messages. In case water has memory, I stood barefoot in a puddle, a dirt and gravel pothole in our parking lot, and buried my toes, entering the beginning of a code. Inhaling the perfume of a bush that lives 11,000 years has been a practice available to me daily. The word experience has its roots in to suffer. My primary concern is not for you to relate to me, but to honor me as a true other who is nonetheless a real person, a real poetry. Some European shepherds used stilts to better observe their flocks from a distance, hence shepherd spiders have long legs. But what we have here is a solitary cellar spider who has built a ropey web from the pipes to a wide-brimmed hat. Today, P said, some people need their nominations desperately. My love adds, we smell fusty to them, as if cosmic time has nothing to do with current events. My insider friend revealed that she can speed read upside down, know how much they make and how much they pay. Capitalism's scribes, over time, makes you kind of awful. I have never seen her move, but I see her work. Some spiders bob to shake their webs when threatened, and then there is autonomy when they release a leg that has been grasped by an external agent. Days held by sartorial routine, mesh bag of used smocks, pushing the limits of doing the opposite of what we're supposed to do, to be useless and building your earned income and have a right to shelter. I noticed neon letters from a small window while taking a shower, OLIV, the arm of a crane a block away, going slower, seeing only the one I love, and slower, only errands. The house is porous. Best home I ever had. Person viewing upstairs unit. It's falling apart. Animals find their way in and out. I walk around the dirt lot with my shirt undone, like this is women's land. Serial dream, fastidiously sewing garments for poets, creating a look that anticipates a viable avant-garde. I was cured of imposter syndrome when I realized no one wanted to wear what I wore. A blank cape that would only read as scrumptious. A woman made of herbed meat and potatoes. Rising from petty moments is a ritual. Well wishes to the young souls and their crowns. Alliteration makes authoritarianism too cute. Dastardly deeds. Infects even my dishwashing. The truest depiction of a politician, Phil Hartman playing Reagan. Who cares what's real anymore? Voice is mostly murder. Genius is whatever. Are heartbreak and gravitas synonymous? Is boredom the poultice? Can I spy on my self-exile? The brown mouse I just saw had 8.5 by 11 flames in her eyes. The train runs on a schedule less transparent than church bells, audible from any point I've rested my head in this town, my body clock unwittingly geared to it in honor of she who took me to a ranch behind the Waffle House and reset me. I left my orange peels in a line, and we, looking like a fabled couple, counted backward. I too have said things other than what I meant, adding to the farcical proceedings of the collective. A mouse gnawing on the back of the stove woke me. You think this is the way it is now. Mouse, this too shall pass. I saw the half-acre dirt yard as a perfect site for a series, so I set up a camera and tried to capture myself the way I am, the way I was, and the way I want to be. Recognized. A slightly misaligned being, releasing soul. New pink sodium vapor bulbs under dark sky ordinance, string of lights on cacti unrelated to holiday, in a socially impossible milieu. I threw style to the hot wind. I saw the astronomy with my naked eye. Early morning half dream. I blew the dust, skulls off of a book of desirable poems and a box of desirable books. Somewhere else, a book is waiting. I drove through the red dust without knowing the time, past a group of women who marched toward the same sundown. Oh, it's eternity, the problem eternally being laws on my body. Make space with buoyance. You and your lover will always be swept into what people think. Upthrust your word choice.
what they think you think based on their mishandling. Hold the space for your lover, a babe in a lake, 3 bodies of water, part of the sky. You are not Chicken Little. You and your lover masquerade as mild people, and no one ever asks you what you think. Friends nor creepazoids. Dream. A scene appeared on my forearm in the form of a sleeve, the ink asking for my visual intelligence, a green leafy limb, fueled by desire in the trunk. Today I may qualify for Medicaid, unable to predict income for 2020. I talked to 4 people at one store about the whereabouts of an electric kettle. I'm going to live my life this way. Language arrives, attention to commonplace. Can that energy age us differently, keep old souls youthful? You can look at yourself more closely from a distance, having left documents, to let go of former selves and their demands. Still, all I want is for my friends to read me. Thank you. I just want to say that it's so special and wonderful to be reading here tonight. It's been 4 years. Every time I read here, it's special and wonderful and overwhelming. And I just feel like it's good to see people I haven't seen in a really long time, and to look in the front row and see Anne and Mónica and Lucy. I'm just really moved. So thank you all for coming here tonight.
Oh my God, Stacy. It's so funny, but it's also so scary, but it's also so hot, and it's also totally devastating. It's like everything that I could ever possibly want a poem to be. So thank you so much. Thank you to Stacy, thank you to Lucy, thank you all for being here, and also enormous thanks to our wonderful event team who made all of this possible, to Project staff. I hope to see you all again very soon. Get home safe. Good night.